friends. Today I'm going to film a very different video from the one I had originally planned for. That one would have been a lot more frivolous and a lot of fun, I like to think. I had planned on sharing with you one of my, I guess you could call it a hobby. It's an enthusiasm bordering on an obsession. I was going to give you a bit of a tour of my collection and share with you some of my favorites. And this is something I still plan to do, maybe next time around, but I'm just not in the proper headspace for it right now. And which is not to say I'm in a bad place, I'm exhausted. I spent the majority of last week working around my day job, which also keeps me very busy, but I was working on hopefully finishing up some last pieces of things that are going into my forthcoming book, which I don't want to make this whole video about this book, but if you are new to my channel, my book, The Art of the Occult, is slated to be released in September. I hope that's still the case, that's what they tell me. And The Art of the Occult is a visual source book focusing on both obscure and iconic works of occult art, as well as the artists who created these works, either through the use of occult techniques or perhaps they were inspired by mystical principles or philosophies, or maybe they just really loved the imagery and aesthetic connected with magical ritual. So that's what the book's about, and if that's your thing, great, I'll put a link in the description box. But I have been spending so much time writing, and it occurred to me that I don't often talk about my writing. I'm sure there's a myriad of reasons for this, and I don't expect to come to any conclusions today, but I thought I might take a page from the book of my friend and fellow writer Lucinda Rose, whose YouTube channel is a writer's log of sorts. She updates weekly and talks about her current projects and she's been working on, and her practices and processes, you know, if she encounters any roadblocks and how she works through those things, as well as her successes. And I do want to say congratulations. Her ebook, I believe, Shadow's Tale, was recently released. So that's fantastic news, and I'm very happy for her, and I do plan on reading it. I haven't had time. So Lucinda Rose, I will be getting to that, and thank you for inspiring today's video. I don't plan on making a regular habit of doing this type of video, but I thought it might be good for me because talking about my writing is very uncomfortable for me. I almost feel like I'm not allowed. Certainly with regard to this book I've been writing over the past year, it wasn't until I was 75, 80, 85% done with it that I even mentioned it to anyone. But even about my own personal writing, I see writers on Twitter, you know, conversing back and forth about their projects, what they're caught up in and what's giving them trouble, and writing about how they're avoiding their writing. I see this all the time, and yet I feel like I can't join in that conversation. Like I don't somehow deserve to be there. And I know there's a lot of imposter syndrome caught up in that, and I don't know where it comes from. I'm sure that's something that therapy could help with if I went to therapy, but I've missed my appointment for like 5 times now, so I gotta get back to that, but that's beside the point. This video is just me talking about some of my writing to get me more acclimated to doing that. And so, as I mentioned, this past week I was wrapping up hopefully what will be the final bits and pieces going into this book, and it was a pretty large task, and I was feeling overwhelmed by it. And even on a good day when the world is normal, I can get pretty distracted when I'm trying to work on these things, or I just get overwhelmed and intimidated before I even start. But I had read about something called the Pomodoro Technique, and I can't tell you much about how it was developed or the history. I'm sure that's worth looking into. I just wanted it for what it could immediately do for me, so I didn't bother to look into all of that. What it is, it's a time management technique, and how it works is you do intently focused bit of work for a set amount of time, say 25 minutes. You set a timer, you work solely on the task at hand, and then you take a 5-minute break. And it's just a method of breaking up an overwhelming task into manageable chunks. And I'm sure there's many versions of this technique, because even as I'm talking about it, it doesn't sound all that unique or, groundbreaking. But I tell you, it really helped. I had until this coming Tuesday to finish this work. That's the deadline for it, and I was done 2 days ago. So I was done like 3 or 4 days before I even needed to be. And I know that might sound funny to some people, but I figure the deadline is when you start working the day before that. So this is a bit of a novelty for me, and I really like having that lack of pressure for this expected work from me. So I highly recommend it. Another thing that Lucinda Rose talks about in one of her recent videos is reviews on your work, and to a lesser extent the critique and criticism that might accompany that. And I have to tell you, I am terrified at the prospect of people reviewing this book. I almost feel like I don't even care if anyone ever reads it or it ever gets purchased from the shelf. I just want to know that I'm done with it, and then I'll never think about it again. And that is a really lame part of my brain, I think, that's generating these really self-defeating kind of thoughts. But I can't lie, part of me does feel that way. Just don't even read it or talk to me about it, right? And I think part of my worry stems from the fact that this is an introductory type of work. You're getting introduced to these artists and these ideas. It doesn't delve deeply into any one aspect of anything that I'm presenting in the book. That's just beyond the scope of this book. So this is not a book meant for academics or scholars. I feel like they would probably be pretty dismissive of it, and that's fine. This book isn't for them. But I am a little bit afraid of that kind of attitude. I'm also kind of getting preemptively mad at people who are going to say, oh, well, why didn't you include XYZ artist? I can assure you I probably attempted to. There's a lot that goes into putting together a book that is just chock full of imagery, and these are things I never would have thought about until I worked on this project. But you have to reach out and get permissions from these authors, and some of these writers. No, some of these artists. I'm the writer. But you have to reach out and get permissions from these artists, and not all of these artists are living to get permission from. As a matter of fact, quite a few of them are very dead. And so you have to go through their estates or galleries or whatever. And that's a process. And even before that, you have to get all of this imagery ideas approved by the publisher, and they're going to reject quite a few of them, which means you have to go back and do some research and put together another list. So let's say everything got approved. You got permissions from the artists or their estate. Then you have to get high resolution artwork that's appropriate for a print medium. And not everyone can provide that. Some people will have agreed and said, okay, yes, you can use my work, and then they go back through their files or their archives or whatever, and then they come back to you, they're like, oh, well, I don't have it, or I only have a low-res image. So I'm hoping that people keep that in mind, but they won't, because I certainly never would have, that when you look through this book and you see, for example, Rosaline Norton, the Witch of King's Cross, they called her. She was a phenomenal occult artist who generated her work through trance techniques and all kinds of really fascinating things. She's not in this book, and I know people are going to look for her. I'm sorry, I tried. And there's going to be other things like that. And so I just worry that people are going to jump down my throat for things like that. Then again, I'm spending a lot of time, as my sister says, catastrophizing. It's possible people will read this book and say, oh my God, I have never heard that artist. I'm going to read as much as I can about it, and then we'll never go back to my book again. So that's fine too. But these are some things that I've been thinking about that have been troubling me. And I'm not really sure what to do about that. There's nothing to do about it. Grow a thick skin, I suppose, and just keep writing and practicing my craft and getting better. And even at my best, people are going to be critical, and not everyone's going to love me, and that's going to have to be okay. But those are the type of things that I'm contending with right now, and that are very uncomfortable to talk about. I'm hoping that by talking about these type of things today, and maybe not on a regular basis, but maybe checking in with you all every once in a while, and checking in with myself at the same time, I can sort of create these conversations with myself. And certainly if anyone watching is a writer and has any suggestions or recommendations from your own personal experience, how you deal with criticism, how you deal with reviews, how do you break up your work so that it's not so overwhelming and intimidating, please feel free to chat with me about it in the comments. But that is what I have been working on lately, and I am so close to being done with this book. I am so excited. I think all I have to do right now is write the acknowledgments, which I should probably do, but I'm probably going to wait till a day before the deadline. So now that I've got a little bit of extra time, but I can start thinking about reading again, for example. I want nothing more than to read something trashy like Crazy Rich Asians, which I actually love that series. I love reading about stupid people and the stupid ways they spend their stupidly rich money. Or what my friend Sonia likes to call the Gone Girl genre, which I don't know that I can adequately explain what that is, but if you know, I think you know. So if you've got any recommendations for me of trashy horror, trashy mystery or suspense, trashy stupid rich people spending their trashy stupid money, please leave me a comment. I would be very excited to read some really stupid, frivolous stuff right now. I did, however, do some writing, for other outlets as I was doing this other stuff, and I did want to share that someone interviewed me. Well, it's an interview of sorts, and that's pretty exciting because I'm usually the one interviewing artists and creators. I'm the one asking the questions. So it was interesting to be on the other side of that, and you can find this interview at Ritual Poetica, which is a new website created by Lisa Marie Basile, who is a writer and a poet, and I adore her. I think she is such a wise, compassionate heart, and she has actually put out 2 books. One is Light Magic for Dark Times, which I reviewed recently over at Haute Macabre in our Stacked column, and the other one is a Magical Writer's Grimoire, I believe is what it's called, which I am reading right now, and I will be asking her some questions about it in an upcoming interview. But anyway, if you're interested in my thoughts on the intersection of writing and magic and how that informs my process, inspires my process, maybe none or all of those things, I will put a link down to that interview in the description box. Speaking of magical writing, I had the distinct privilege of being able to attend an occult writing workshop, online of course, put together by Pam Grossman, who is a witch and a writer, and Janica Stuckey, who is an occult poet / performer. I've seen him live performing one of his pieces. He is incredible. And the two of them put together this occult writing workshop, and it was such an enjoyable and meaningful experience. Even if you are not into the occult or esoteric, you don't have a magical practice, you're not a witch or a pagan or whatever, I think you would still find this very helpful. They shared some ideas and practices and techniques to coming at your creativity through different angles and hanging your ego up at the door and getting out of your own way to just start writing, and it was fantastic. So if they offer this class again, and I'm sure they will, I highly suggest that you sign up for it. Another thing I'm looking forward to is my friends Jack Guignol and Tenebrous Kate have a fabulous podcast called Bad Books for Bad People, where they discuss just lurid, perverse literature. They talk about Gothic classics like Matthew Lewis's The Monk, or for example, I just listened to them dissect and break down the Sookie Stackhouse Southern Vampire Mysteries. I think they just recently did an episode on The Witcher, which I haven't read, nor have I listened to the episode, so I should do both, because I'm sure I will enjoy their thoughts on the book as I enjoy their thoughts on everything they talk about. This time around, they're discussing the Icelandic adaptation of Dracula, and Dracula is one of my all-time A+++, 5-star, #1 favorite stories. That and Harriet the Spy, which do with that as you will. But I'm very much looking forward to Kate and Jack discussing this book. So those are a few things that are on my list of how I'm going to spend this time I have now. And I'm pretty excited about that. So those are my thoughts for today. As I said, next time around, I will take you on an aromatic tour of my collection, and that's just a hint as to what you might see. So if you think you might be interested in that, I hope you'll tune in. And if you liked anything you heard today, if anything intrigued you, I hope you'll like this video. And if you're looking for more of this kind of thing, I'm sure I'll be discussing it in the future, so be sure you subscribe to my channel as well. Anyway, thank you all for watching today, and I hope you'll join me next time. Till later, weirdos.